All right, so I'll introduce myself. I'm Coach Mike Theuerkauf, Northern Valley Regional High School at Demarest. In my 25th year as the head track and field coach for the boys team. Can't believe it's been 25 years already. I also have been a head coach for cross country for a similar amount of time. I used to coach football at Demarest as well. And I'm also a special education teacher at Northern Valley, and I teach science and I teach history. So I guess that kind of sums it up.
Yeah. And then you like your college experience, like where
Yeah,
you
my college experience, I went to University of Virginia. I was a thrower at University of Virginia. I was fortunate enough to be an ACC champion and place every year down there. It was a great program to be a part of. It was a lot of fun. And in high school, I threw at Northern Valley Demarest, where I'm currently coaching, and I had a pretty good career there too as well.
what made you choose high school athletics over college athletics?
So it's kind of a long, convoluted story. So I'll try to make it quick. So coming out of college, I was pre-law. So I was working in the Bergen County Courthouse, jeopardizing cases under Judge Simon. After a year, I realized that was not the route I wanted to go. Then I worked for Apple Computer for about another year, and I was in the educational side. And one of the jobs we got contracted out to do was putting in T1 lines and stuff like that at Northern Valley Demarest. And being that I was a graduate there, I was the rep to sent out to go do that job. And when I was in the high school hallways, my old high school coach said, "Hey, Turk, what are you doing here?" Explain what was going on. And Coach Mack was like, "Hey, you owe me, by the way. You didn't have to pay for college. So get your ass down on the track and help out when you're done with this like computer stuff." I'm like, all right. So I go down and I loved it, loved helping out, loved coaching the athletes. Never thought I'd ever get back into it again. And then shortly that week too, the special ed director saw me running wires and stuff through the board office where her office was. And she was kind of like, "Hey, you're one of our kids, aren't you?" I go, "Yeah." She goes, "I remember you when you were sitting in our classes." And then I talked to the special ed classes too, because my old supervisor, my supervisor when I got hired, the old supervisor director, Rosetta Riondo, said, "Our kids basically think they can't make it out of high school and be successful. And obviously you're doing pretty well." So at that point, I decided I wanted a career change because I liked working with the kids in the classroom and I liked coaching high school kids. So then now I don't have an education degree at all. So I got to go back to grad school and get an education degree. And then I knew Fairleigh Dickinson, just kind of right around the corner, had a nice educational program, especially for special ed, and especially in an Orton Gillingham program, which specializes in dyslexia, which I am 100% dyslexic. So it was kind of like, it was really cool to study a field that I was pretty, immersed in and familiar with. And then when I was in college, I got offered to be a coach there with Mike Shea, and I coached in college. So it was a nice fit. So I was working on my college degree, my graduate degree, coaching in college, got 3 or 4 years of coaching in college under my belt. And then when Coach McLean retired, it was always my plan to come back to high school and coach. And that's kind of the full circle right there. Why I'm coaching in high school. There you go.
How do you use your own experience as a student athlete to help support the ones you coach now?
Well, this is kind of hopefully a good conversation the two of us can have. Being that you're one of my old former athletes, I would say, not every good athlete makes a good coach, but if you're able to balance your rapport with your athletes, you're able to balance the knowledge of the sport you have, and then bring the experience back that you had as a high level athlete. I think it gives, like, for example, when you were chasing a state title in the discus and you were kind of going through, you were going through a slump, I would say your senior year, and knowing that I've been there, done that, and coached kids to get through it, and having similar experience myself, I would like to be able to say that experience and that wisdom helped you out go through that same thing, being that, your coach may have never experienced those things and might have a hard time relating to their athletes. I knew what you were going through firsthand. And I don't know, it's probably the first time I'm ever asking this question. I don't know if it helped, but the results speak for itself. I mean, you ended up being a state champ your senior year after going through a pretty long, slumpy kind of mid-season.
Yeah.
And the writing was on the wall. I knew it was going on with you. It was kind of obvious. We just had to tweak 1 or 2 things, but it took a long time to fix. But then once we fixed it, I mean, you went on a tear. I think you went undefeated. It was kind of cool.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, I don't know. Do you think it helps as an
Obviously,
athlete?
come on.
No, do you think it helps to have a coach who's experienced help you
Of
go through
course.
things?
Of
Yeah.
course. It was like having like a secret weapon like under your belt. It's like, oh, Turk's been through this so many times and he's done it himself. It's like,
Yeah.
you know,
So I definitely think it's beneficial, but I've been around long enough to see that not all really good, great athletes end up being good coaches because sometimes things came so natural to them. And for me, it wasn't a natural thing. I mean, I was a good thrower early on, but to get to the next levels took a lot of hard work. And, some coaches with all that experience as an athlete, sometimes it doesn't convey over to their athletes because if they can't relate to an athlete's experience because they were so talented, sometimes it doesn't translate. But I think more often than not, it definitely helps being an athlete that's been there and done that to give that experience back to their athletes.
yeah. And then
So,
that kind of branches off to my next question. What would you say makes, like, what characteristics would an elite high school thrower or athlete have, in your opinion?
so talking about elite. So if we're talking about at the elite level, and I'm sure we're talking about all state to all American to world level. We're not talking about the county kid at this time. I would be saying you're like a state champ or above because everybody has a different definition of what elite is. Like, parents in eighth grade think the kid wins the middle school championship. Their kid's elite. It's not elite. So at least not yet. So if you're talking about elite, it does take some amount of potential, right? Whether it's genetic potential, whether it's, some sort of pain threshold potential, something. There's something that they're innately born with that gives them potential to be an elite athlete. Then once you have some of that potential, not everybody with potential is going to be an elite athlete. I think the most common thing in this world is wasted talent. So by that definition, what else is there that can make somebody elite? I think it's somebody with the willingness to keep training hard day in and day out and consistently be positive, consistently be willing to do what it takes to get to that level, be passionate about it. I think that's one of the biggest criteria I think any athlete needs to do is be passionate about what they do first and not worry about where their end game is going to end up. Because one day we're all told we're going to be hanging up our spikes one day, and it's a reality for all of us. So you better enjoy the journey on the way. And if you enjoy the journey on the way, you're going to be the best you can be. But if you try to always look at the end, like my end goal is to get a scholarship to college, my end goal is to be an All-American, it starts to become a job and not fun anymore. Just enjoy the sport, work as hard as you can, have fun doing it every day, get a good group of people you enjoy to train with, hopefully have good guidance along the way. And then that's the recipe for being elite. So there you go.
um
And if it was easy, anybody could do it.
that's very true. Yes. What do you think an athlete should focus on most in choosing a school to commit to?
Ooh, are we talking about like for track, like your
Yeah, yeah,
process, my process? So if you're choosing a school, this is a hard one, right?
yeah.
So you want to look at where your ability fits in. Like in track, it's easy. Look at your marks, right? Where do your marks fit in? What conferences are you going to be competitive at? And I think it's important that athletes choose schools where they're going to be competitive at and they're going to be in a mix. And obviously that increases your scholarship potential too, because if you're somebody that's going to be a walk-on in the Big Ten, but then in the NEC, you're going to be in the mix for finals. Obviously, an NEC school will probably give you money to go to do track there versus a Big Ten is going to say you're a walk-on. So unless you're hell bent on being that walk-on Rudy kid, and trying to do something for nothing, and it's a dream of yours to compete there, my advice is find a school you're going to be competitive at, have fun at, where the coaches generally want you. I find athletes are much more successful if they're in a place where the coaches want them, they fit in, and it can be competitive. So that's the one thing. And you can use something like TFERs, you know what TFERs are, and you can zoom around and see where you would fit in. So that's the first criteria. Find out where you're going to fit in. Then after that, for us, for track, is find out if the school has your events, because not all schools have throwing coaches, not all schools have pole vault coaches. So now you got to do some homework, find out, okay, I can compete in the NEC or I compete in the Big Ten, which schools have a good throwing program, which school has a good distance program. and then see how you fit in with those athletes. Then I got to say, now, once you start narrowing that down, what schools then have the programs I want to study academically, right? Can I afford the school with scholarship money as well? Then when you narrow that down, now you got to start looking for the tough spot is, do they have a good culture? And this is what I think I'm going to talk about with Monmouth about, and Joe and Abe, is I was never worried about you going off to Monmouth because I knew they had a good longstanding culture. I knew that if anything happened to Joe or Abe while you were there, the school was going to get good coaches to replace them, and their program was not going to go downhill because of the tradition they built there. Some schools, I mean, I can't tell you, I mean, Demorest has had over like 200 athletes go compete in college. And I would say close to half of them have lost their coaches somewhere in mid of their athletic career. And if they're in a program that's historically good, then historically they have recruited and hired good coaches to replace them. But if they're a school that has like a toxic culture, if they're a school that's always been kind of like the bottom of their conference, if it's a school that transitions a lot of coaches, then when you look at that, and again, you have to do a little history research on your schools, then you might be in trouble when you're there. You know, you might be in a position where they don't replace your coach, or every year you get a new coach, and then throwers come in and out, and programs are always at the bottom of the conference. Then you're going to be at a program that you might not be happy at 4 years down the road. So you got to do some research and ways to see that there is a good, healthy tradition in your program. Like, I've known Joe when I was coaching in college, and I'm talking about Joe Compagni, the Monmouth coach. And I always knew he was like an athlete centered type coach, where he really genuinely cared about his athletes. And he cared about how they were doing in the classroom. He cared about how they were doing with their families. And he cared about you. I mean, I think you can say that even though you weren't one of his athletes as a thrower, but you were one of his athletes as a head coach. And in that kind of climate, I would say goes to his assistants and stuff too. And when you're a part of a program like that, I mean, Joe created a program at Monmouth which could take down Rutgers and Princeton and some of the Big East schools. And it's a little tiny Monmouth school that's a powerhouse at track. That says something. And then when you have a student first or athlete first type of philosophy, those athletes put the team first. You know, there's two ways to look at and have a successful program. You know, there's all these programs that's team first. And Northern Valley certainly seems like that from my point of view, from the outside. You know, if you're the outside looking in, you might say Northern Valley is all about team. They're winning all these team championships. But you as an athlete, I think, would say, you know, we are a student-centered, athlete-first kind of program that cares about the athletes. And they, in turn, want to win championships because they know we all care about each other. You know, and I think, to me, that's the type of program we have. That's the type of program you're at. And that's the type of program I believe a lot of athletes want to be a part of. And that's a harder thing to research when you go. You almost have to go on a recruiting trip to get the feel of when you're out with the throwers. You know, when you're out with the distance runners, when you're out that night, you know, maybe partying on campus or going to a basketball game or having a team lunch, you know, or meeting the coaches for a breakfast in the morning, you kind of get a feel whether or not it's a bunch of bullshit or whether it's real and sincere, you know. And you also, there's always little warning signs too. If the team, you know, if some of the throwers don't show up to the team dinner to meet all the new recruits, if, you know, the team doesn't seem too tight when they're hanging out all together, you can kind of see whether the culture of the team is good and healthy, whether it's toxic or not. And you definitely want to be part of a positive culture and a healthy team.
So how do you provide like support for your high school athletes going through the recruiting process?
So first off, I depending how talented they are when they're young, like what markers are they hitting, it's easier to guide someone through the college process when, you know, like sophomore year, they're already hitting state standards and college recruiting standards. It gives you a little bit more buffer to a couple more, you know, more time to guide them in the process. But let's just say any athlete that comes through Northern Valley, the first thing we do is we look where their performance matches up against like TFers and stuff like that. And we also look with their guidance department. And that's, what is that freaking program we use at Demorest that gives you a list of schools you're supposed to be at? I forget it. You know, you type it on a computer and it gives
Oh,
you
yeah.
Naviance.
Okay, yeah.
So if and I don't know how serious you were at your Naviance, but we typically get a list from the guidance counselors of the schools that they can get into. And then you look at those schools, and that gives you an idea of what schools we can look at athletically. And then I'll sit down with the student athlete and we'll kind of like cross-reference what schools they have track, they're competitive, they can be at, and that's also on their list. Now, when you're looking at their talent, if there's somebody who's like an all-state kid or higher, you can certainly start reaching higher academically, because now you can see that sports or track can be a device to get him into a notch higher academically. And you start guiding them there. And then I tell all the athletes, go on to the schools that you're interested in, go onto the recruiting webpage, write a letter to the head coach, find out if they're interested. And then if there's schools that I personally know the coaches, I'll call off the coach right off the bat, like I called for you for Joe, and talk to Abe, and find out if they're interested directly. And then if there's schools that I'm not familiar with, but there's probably not too many college coaches I don't know at this point. But if I'm not familiar with them, I'll reach out too. I'll either send an email or I'll send a call, and I'll say, hey, I'm Coach Turk from Northern Valley, and my pole vaulter really would love to go to William and Mary. What are you looking for as an athlete junior year? What numbers? This is what his like scores are and his GPA. Or is he a walk-on ability? Is he somebody that's a recruited walk-on? Like, how do you see him or her? And that's kind of like to help the athletes out. And a lot of times, depending on the level again too, sometimes I'll even sit down, with their family, either in my living room or their house, or at the athletic director's table in our school. And I'll sit down with the family and we can discuss, because a lot of parents have questions that they just don't know, they're unfamiliar with it. So we'll sit down and we'll talk and kind of guide them, and they'll have a million questions. But fortunately, I think track's probably one of the easiest sports to navigate through, just because your performances are numbers. So what the Big Ten's looking for, what the Pac-12 is looking for, like what the ACC is looking for. So if you hit the numbers, it's kind of easy to steer you in a direction. I wouldn't say it's easy to get a scholarship in college, but it's easy to figure out what road to take.
Yeah. How do you think the recruiting process has changed since when you attended?
So it's changed a lot for the better. It is definitely more athlete oriented, athlete centered. When I was in college, you couldn't take an official recruit. When I was in high school, you couldn't take an official recruiting trip until the fall of your senior year. I mean, a lot of athletes want to already be signed, done with before the fall even happens. So now the NC2As is allowing juniors to go in the springtime, which I think is great. Like, I think they should allow kids to go on recruiting trips even earlier. Like if you're talented enough as a sophomore or a early junior year, get the kids on campus so they can start seeing what it's about. I don't think there's anything negative to that. And I think I think there were still 5 official visits when I was in college, in high school, and there's 5 now. So
I thought it was 6. Wasn't that 6?
Is it 6 now? I forget. I got to ask my daughter. My daughter's going on them soon, so I don't know if it's 6 now. But how many recruiting trips do you get, Riley? Yeah, it's still 5. Still 5. So that's the only big change. I mean, my recruiting trips were a lot of fun. I went on a lot of good schools, and they were a lot of fun. Riley's dancing in the background. You see it. So they were just good experiences. Every single place I went was enlightening. It was enjoyable. And it was kind of cool.
Having a little too much fun, too.
Yeah, it's kind of, I tell you what, maybe you felt this way, maybe not. You work so hard when you're young. And when I was younger, I never thought I was going to go off to college and be an athlete. I kind of went on, probably he's being a knucklehead. I kind of always thought I was going to be a blue collar kid, and I was going to be working like construction or something. So I never thought I was going to be college bound. So, when all of a sudden I realized that people actually valued me for being an athlete, and they were taking me and spending, flying me places, and dinners are being paid for, and teams taking me out to football games or basketball games. And I was like, it's kind of cool, like kind of nice. So
nice. This is great.
Yeah, it's like, this is, and they're going to pay me, they're going to pay for all my college expenses to throw an iron ball. I'm like, I kind of didn't quite get it, but I get it now as a coach. I think it's an awesome opportunity. There's no difference between throwing an iron ball or throwing a leather pigskin ball 90 miles an hour. I mean, what's the real difference between any sport, right? All sports have one universality to it. And it's, you got to work hard to get to the next level, and there's value in every sport. So I don't see my worth as a shot putter any different than a quarterback of the, the national championship team. We're all athletes. At the end of the day, we're all athletes. It's just
Yeah.
what everybody else values,
What is your view on the mental pressure high school athletes put on themselves during the recruiting process? I mean, I put a lot of pressure on myself. That was like,
Yeah, I think it's unnecessary. I mean, it's easy to say it's unnecessary, when you're not going through it. I think there's a huge difference between my time with the pressure of it versus today. I think there's too much pressure people put on this process today than there ever was in my day. My day was just like, hey, cool, you're going on a recruiting trip. Like, hey, where am I going to end up? I don't know. Like it never stressed me out. It never really bothered me. It seemed like these were just all good things. They were all really good things. They were all really good opportunities. So why would it be a negative stress event? Right. Today, everybody's so serious. Oh, if I don't get into Columbia, I don't know what I'm going to do with myself. Like, okay, like the other option you have might be Bucknell. It might be Boston College. Could even be Cornell. Like those are great options to have. Like if you don't get into your number one, your number 2, 3, and 4, other people in this world would love to be able to get into. So what's the stress? Now, granted, I mean, there are some stresses if it's like a money issue and, like, hey, I'm going to get 90% scholarship going here. I hope I get in, or I hope I get that position versus going somewhere else. And it might be 50% and it provides a strain on my family. That's a real stress. But other than that, I think it's a shame that I think it's part parents. I think it's part athletes. I think it's part our culture. I think it's part the school system. I think all those things kind of add up to this hidden pressure that it's not one thing that's really big. It's like 3,000 things that are really small that make this ton of weight on top of people's head that gives them all the stress. And nobody can really identify what is this one stress factor. And again, if you look at all the little things and add them all up, you realize they're not all that big of a deal. And I think stress management is something that we've gotten worse at as a society and as a culture than better. And I think we got to do a better job of it. And I think that's got to start down at the younger levels. I think we're going to do a much better job with the younger kids managing stress, because if you can't manage it when you're young, you're certainly not going to manage it well when you're older.
I went crazy. Like it was so bad for me.
So I don't know if I gave you a good answer to that.
No, you did. You did. What do you think is the most important thing an athlete should focus on this summer going into their first year at college?
Well, so let's say you're going off to Monmouth, right? Your first year, I would say they're going to give you a program to follow over the summer, right? So do what your college coach tells you to do over the summer. I would say most college coaches, and then having a coach in college, want you to kind of take it easy and relax and get healthy after your hard spring season, let your body recover, because it's going to be the first time you're going to train year round for track, right? For the most part, most track and field athletes, if they're a thrower and you're a guy, you probably were playing football in the fall. If you're a girl like you're probably playing soccer before in the fall. And if you're a year-round thrower, your fall in high school probably was pretty laid back. So I would say the most important thing is to probably enjoy your summer before you go off to college. Stay in just good athletic shape. Like have fun doing some cross training, have fun keeping it light, because now you're going off to college and you're going to be working hard for 4 years, potentially summer, training summer times over there. So enjoy your summer going into college. Take it easier than harder. Let your body heal as much as it can, like recover from whatever injuries you may have had coming out of high school. And just be excited to go in, because the first day of fall, they start training. You show up on campus, you're training every day, and track's year round. And in college, track is year round. So it's a different animal than high school. It's a lot more hours. So be ready for it.
Yeah. My last question, what should high school athletes look forward to the most going into college?
Well, I would say this, if you're going off to college for track, you're an elite kid, right? Because very few people go off and get to compete in college. And I think one of the things that I enjoyed most at UVA was being around a bunch of peers that all got it. They were all as into it as you were when you were in high school. And then all of a sudden you're around a family of people that enjoy it as much as you. Where in high school, you might have 10% of your team or 20% of your team get it at that level. For most high school athletes, practice ends when practice is over. For all elite level kids, you still got another 4 hours of practice some nights because your throwing practice is done. Now you're going to go to the weight room for an hour and a half to 2 hours. You might watch some films. You might recover and do PT and roll out. You might have some sprint work or plyos or med ball or something. So you don't have the majority of the people leave high school practice and do those extra things you did. Now you're with a group of people that those extra things are just common practice. And it's fun being around people that get it and be a part of what you love to do, So I think that was my favorite part of college, was just being around it 24/7 with a whole bunch of serious people. Having a team that wants to go for a conference title. I was fortunate enough where Brian Munshine, my old college coach, realized that the ACC was hurting for throwers and saw an opportunity to score a bunch of points in a throw. So he hit it hard, recruiting throwers. And I was obviously one of the recruits. My buddy Pete Sheehan, who was runner-up in New Jersey State, and I think he was runner-up or discus champion. And another guy, Mike Murphy, who was the Delaware State champion of shot and a discus. That was my freshman recruiting class. So we have, a bunch of state champs from different states going at it. And we went 1, 2, 3, 4 in the shot at the ACC level, which is freaking awesome. And it was fun to be a part of that, So look forward to those things. And then the last thing I would say for anybody going into college is enjoy the moment while you're there. It's going to go so fast. It's going to be a blur. And you're so busy working so hard to achieve your goals, you sometimes forget to sit back and enjoy the moments. And my favorite times are still not the championships and the team wins and all that stuff. The moments you have grinding it with your fellow teammates. Like, to me, those are all, the time you spent on the bus. Monmouth doesn't travel as far as Virginia did because you were up and down the ACC, but sometimes you get on a bus or a train and it's 6, 8, 10 hours and you're just doing goofy stuff, having fun with your teammates. And it was always a good time. And like our wedding planner said, for me and Judy, we had an old Italian backyard wedding. The wedding planner stopped us and looked at it the day of our wedding and said, listen, you guys are going to be awfully busy today. Take a moment to enjoy your wedding day. And he's like, most couples never get to enjoy their wedding because they're so busy greeting and shaking hands and doing ceremonial stuff. I would say over the next 4 years, to any college athlete, step back, enjoy the time while you're there. Make sure you make good memories and just live in a moment. Don't look to the future yet. Just live in a moment. There you go. How's that?
He said, there it is. There.
Here it is.
Perfect.
That's all I got.